Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure and anticipation that I extend a warm welcome to each one of you gathered here today for this plenary session on artificial intelligence and the future of work. For sure, the field is progressing and changing rapidly, and the skill set expected of job seekers is changing rapidly. For example, in some job applications, AI literacy may now be worth more than a university degree. Certainly, generative AI offers advantages as well as disadvantages. AI holds the promise of revolutionizing industries, economies, and indeed our daily lives with its unprecedented capabilities in data processing and pattern recognition. AI presents boundless opportunities for advancement and progress, from improving productivity and efficiency to opening new frontiers of innovation and discovery. According to some estimates, AI adoption could boost productivity growth by 1.5 percentage points per year over a 10-year period and raise global GDP by 7%. Yet, alongside these opportunities, AI also presents questions and challenges. We do not know precisely how AI will impact the nature of work and employment. What will be the implications for skills development, for job displacement, and for workforce adaptation? Also, we do not know how we can ensure that the benefits of AI are equitably distributed across society. History offers many instances of new inventions that failed to bring shared prosperity. There are many questions. Could innovations in AI boost labor's contribution to production and complement labor rather than just automate work and displace labor? Could we use AI to design individualized education programs, improve access to healthcare? Can new versions of existing tasks in which labor has a comparative advantage be created? And how will labor markets in middle-income and low-income countries change? How will wages change? How should we reform business models on using personal data collected by AI? And how should we reform the tax system to shift incentives toward human complementary technological choices? All of these are complex and multifaceted issues that demand our collective attention, collaboration, and foresight. We are excited today to have a group of distinguished speakers in this session. We will have the privilege of hearing from leading experts and thought leaders who will share their insights, perspectives, and visions on the topic. So without much further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Professor Daron Acemoğlu, who is our keynote speaker today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and thanks for the introduction. And sorry I couldn't be there personally, but I'm still very happy I can share my ideas with you. I'll try to be brief so that we leave time for discussion and comments. So I'm going to talk about AI and the future of the global economy. I don't think I need to remind you that the current developments are truly breathtaking, and so is the amount of power, energy, and investment that's going to this field. The current AI models are trained on ensembles of computers that are doing 10 to the 15 floating point operations per second. The Apollo control computer that sent people to the moon was doing 1,500 per second floating point operations. So the reach and power of these models are truly breathtaking, and so are some of their achievements. But who will benefit from them? Will workers, will democracy, will citizens around the world benefit, or will it be just a few people in Silicon Valley? I want to argue that this question is inseparable from the ideology of AI. What sort of vision we want for AI? The one that's quite dominant today is one that goes back to this very famous gentleman, Alan Turing, who was a brilliant mathematician, but he was also a philosopher. And he argued that it was desirable, feasible, and in fact, almost inevitable that machines would be as smart as computers. Computers would be as smart as humans. So he argued about the feasibility and desirability of autonomous machine intelligence, meaning machine capabilities that are at the human level, and autonomous meaning that it's self-acting without a human telling machines what to do. This was very much taken on board by this group of gentlemen, for example, at the Dartmouth project, the Dartmouth conference, who are, each one of them is very famous, but I won't go through their names. But that's where the field of AI was christened, and some of its objectives were set. And the current, let's say, obsession, prioritization of artificial general intelligence is very much a continuation of the current architecture of large language models. From the very beginning, however, there was a very different vision of AI, and in fact, of computers. Starts with this gentleman here, Norbert Wiener, who was writing more or less at the same time as Alan Turing, arguing that machines had to be useful to humans. So this is what we call machine usefulness as opposed to machine intelligence, and developed both philosophical and mathematical ideas related to that. Some of the computer innovations that have become a complete part of our lives, the computer mouse, the hyperlink, hypertext, menu-driven computers. All of these came out of this agenda. So it wasn't just a philosophical agenda, it actually bore fruit. Douglas Engelbart and his students developed many of the technologies that are at the forefront of what we do today out of this human complementary agenda. J.C.R. Licklider, another one of these luminaries, applied the same ideas to the ARPANET and then the internet. So the protocols and the architecture of the internet came out of this vision that machines had to be useful to humans. It has since been superseded by this artificial general intelligence. But if you go back to J.C.R. Licklider's writings, more than 60 years ago, he was actually anticipating what the true promise, in my mind, is of the current advances in generative AI. So what he was talking about is computer-human symbiosis. And what he meant by that is that computers creating a partnership with humans, providing information for identifying problems and presenting them to humans to act on them. You know, this is not just something relevant for office workers, although much of the emphasis has been on that. You know, if you look at what a current day electrician does or a blue-collar worker does, it's a series of problem-solving tasks. And these can be greatly helped if the correct information, reliable and useful information, is provided to them in real time so that they can perform more expert work. There is evidence that current architecture can sometimes do that. So I think there is a case that J.C.R. Licklider's dream has come closer to reality with some of these advances. However, I'm going to argue that that's not the path we're going to, and it's not the path from which the developing world can benefit either. Instead, 4 distinct and I would say formidable roadblocks are on the path to such progress. Excessive automation, loss of informational diversity, misalignment between human cognition and algorithms, and monopolized control of information. Each one of these roadblocks, I think, is exacerbated, or in fact is rooted in the wrong vision of AI, where machines should become our overlords, or at least should become as good as us, and then controlled by a small cadre of people. Instead, a more democratic vision of AI has to be rooted in what I call machine usefulness. Machines are going to have to be at the service of workers, citizens, and the broader community, not just a small group of tech executives or their own autonomous beings. I think I don't need to repeat this very much, but the picture of what happened with the previous wave of automation is by now quite well understood. This is US real wages for men, women, and workers of different education levels. In the 50s and 60s, you had the period of shared prosperity where you had very strikingly rapid growth in real wages, 2.5% a year in inflation-adjusted terms, and very broadly shared, all of these groups growing at more or less at the same rate. But then around 1980, with the digital age, came much greater inequality, but even more jarringly, this real wage declines for low education workers for about a 40-year period. There's no other equivalent to this in the advanced economy's history over the last 200 years. So why is this? It has, of course, many reasons, but my work with Pasquale Restrepo has argued that this is due to excessive automation. We have used digital technologies for automation and not enough for creating new tasks, new complementarities, new information for workers. And so here is a chart from the work with Pasquale Restrepo. What I have on the vertical axis is the change in the real wages for a demographic group from 1980 to 2018. So this is the period where I showed you there were these declines. Demographic groups are a little bit more detailed now: gender, education, age, and ethnicity. And you can see many of these dots are below the zero line. These are the groups that are losing out while the economy is growing, new technologies are being rolled out. And then on the horizontal axis, I have the extent of automation that each one of these groups has been experiencing. What's the fraction of tasks that they used to perform that have since been automated? And you see a very striking relationship indicating that automation is very intimately linked to the super fast rise in inequality and the pattern of non-shared prosperity. This is not a new phenomenon. Automation in history is not new, and tensions or struggles over automation are not new either. And history also shows that there are no automatic correction mechanisms at play. The first phase of the Industrial Revolution created the same sort of tensions. Weavers, for example, lost about half of their real earnings in the course of about 20 years, from around early 1800s to 1830s. And again, there was no automatic correction mechanism. Things started doing better after the 1840s, 1850s, but that's because of very fundamental political reform, much greater democracy. Labor organization, trade unions that were banned and heavily prosecuted became legal, and there was a redirection of technological change that was quite fundamental. My work with Pasquale Restrepo, David Outer, and Joe Hazel shows that pre-generative AI, pre-ChatGPT AI, was also being used for automation. So it's not just the digital technologies before AI. So the talk of AI helping workers has been going on for over 10 years, but the evidence is that the establishments that adopted AI were especially those that wanted to automate. And there is a different path. The different path as shown by the second half of the Industrial Revolution. It's shown by what happened in the auto industry in the United States early on. It's shown by the 3 decades of economic growth after World War II, all emphasize these new tasks, new capabilities for workers. So here you see, for example, the Ford Motor Factory. Yes, Ford was a leader in introducing new machinery, but the new machinery didn't just automate. It automated some tasks, but it also created a lot of technical tasks for new workers. So I think that's the key with AI as well. So excessive automation rooted in this obsession with artificial general intelligence and getting machines to be as good as humans, I think is pushing us towards non-shared prosperity. And in my other work, I have also argued it's not going to deliver the same sort of productivity gains that are hoped for. I'm going to be much quicker in terms of what I'm going to say for the other 3 roadblocks to leave time, but they're all about, they're all about the same sort of issues, which is imagine that we overcome the excessive automation problem. So we try to actually provide better information to workers, better information to decision makers, better information to people.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Daron, we cannot see your presentation.
Oh,
Yeah, because
I see. I've been going through it.
connection problem. Yeah.
Well, you were able to see it before, and it's just now that.
Now you're back.
Okay, all right.
Great, thank you.
Can you see it now? Yes. Perfect. Okay, so in fact, the last 2 slides visuals weren't so important, so you didn't miss much if there was a brief interruption to the visual. So what I'm going to argue is that the current way that AI is being used, in fact, is being conceived, is going to create other problems if we want to use it in useful ways. The first one is loss of informational diversity. What I mean by that is that a lot of collective human learning comes from individuals experimenting and doing different things. But if you don't calibrate and create the right informational tools, it's going to make people do conformal things. Everybody tends to do the same thing. And this is actually, we've seen this danger both with pre-AI technologies and with AI technologies. With pre-AI technologies, for example, GPS, it's a super useful technology. I love it. But the evidence is that when GPS is first introduced in many places, it actually doesn't improve traffic behavior. It leads to quite a significant increase in congestion in minor roads because everybody is going to the same minor roads. Everybody is conforming to what the model is recommending. That's not a way to boost collective intelligence. In fact, it's worse than that. AI may be digging its own grave. In what way? Well, because AI is taking information from human sources, it actually discourages humans from participating in ways that will produce that information. So a great example is Stack Overflow, the computer and math website. After ChatGPT was trained there and started writing some subroutines, what you see is that Stack Overflow traffic completely collapses. So nobody now anymore goes and exchanges information, asks experts. Experts don't think about their problems. They don't come up with solutions. And if you try to design a new large language model and want to train it on new input from Stack Overflow, you cannot do that anymore. So that's what I mean. It's that AI is not just replacing, it's actually maybe digging its own grave because of its current architectural problems. The other issue is that if, in fact, AI is going to be useful to human decision makers, it needs to give inputs that human can understand and use appropriately. And there's evidence from two areas, predictive policing and medical information, that in fact, because of the black box nature of these models, human decision makers are unable to do that. They don't understand why a particular advice or information is being provided, and they tend to misuse it. For example, work by my colleagues, Agarwal, Sals, and co-authors shows that physicians interpret the input from AI models incorrectly because of their black box nature. And then the final thing I want to point out is an obvious, so I'll be extremely quick. These models are centralizing information, but they're also creating a monopoly of control of information. And this is, you see the tip of the iceberg there in terms of what happened, for example, with social media, when social media started scooping up information and then tried to monetize it. I think we can get much worse with AI. I had another slide here, which I guess I'm missing. I had a slide on what this implies for the Global South. I think the biggest issue that I want to say on the Global South is that, Global South is not at the table. Currently, AI advances are going to have major implications for more than 5 billion people who don't live in Europe, United States, or China, but they have no voice in this. The global division of labor is going to change. The way in which surveillance is done, public communication, democratic participation, all of these are going to change potentially in the next 20 years or so, but without any input from the developing world. And what happens when there is no input from the developing world? Then AI becomes something that's done to the developing world. You see that in one place already, facial recognition and surveillance technologies. China has exported surveillance technologies to over 60 non-democratic countries already. So this is the kind of AI that many in the developing world are going to experience because their voice is not being heard when it comes to what type of AI, how can we make better use of AI? Are there self-correction mechanisms? Not from research. The blue and the orange here is academic industry collaborations and industry in AI. So pure academic research is now a very, very small minority of research. So it's all the industry agenda. And if the industry has the wrong economic incentives and has the wrong ideology about artificial general intelligence and humans being subservient to machines, I think it's a bad outcome. And I will not even go through this slide where I'll refer you to my book with Simon Johnson, as well as some other writings where we talk about how you can trigger policy and societal changes, including institutional changes and regulations. But our focus, unfortunately, for obvious reasons, has been on the United States and Europe. But I think we need to have this conversation broader, including the global South as well. Thank you.
Dr. Daron, thank you so much for your presentation. We're so fortunate that you could join us today, although virtually. You're the leading expert in the field and written extensively. We have been informed, unfortunately, that you'll be with us only for an hour, so we will proceed quickly. We have 3 commentators today with us. The first one is Dr. Wagi Asad.
Great. I'll try to be very brief because Professor Acemoglu already anticipated some of my comments that were not in the presentation, but he made them in the oral presentation. First, I'd like to express my thanks to ERF for inviting me to comment on such an important topic with the person who's likely the prime authority on the topic in the world. So it's really an honor to do that. Now, like all technological transformation, AI has both utopian and has been described in both utopian and dystopian terms. And as our chair said about the predictions about the increase in productivity and GDP, if you believe some of these numbers, they're enormous. And the dystopian views predict large-scale displacement of workers, as a result of task automation, job losses that exceed job gains, concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, some, of course, of these issues that Professor Acemoglu has already talked about. He also adds to that the kind of the creation of so-called bad tasks that Professor Acemoglu describes as the use of the technology for bad things like deep fakes, misinformation, false advertisement, increased surveillance, addictive social media, etc. So while Professor Acemoglu's work has served to temper the utopian expectations and really show that the growth and productivity implications are much, much smaller if you actually do the calculations on what tasks are likely to be automated, his predictions for the dystopian side is that it's possible, but it depends on what we do about it. We can do something about it. However, what can be done about it is a bit of a long shot, given the way that the technology is going and the research is going at this place. It requires significant institutional interventions and democratically driven institutional and legal interventions. But Professor Acemoglu really laid out for us what are the issues, what are the roadblocks, and what it is that needs to be done to make the technology more human-friendly. But what I'm not yet clear on is what are the mechanisms that are going to be necessary to get people together to do what's necessary to diverge to this more human-centered AI. Because at this point, the market is not going to do it. It's a classical externality problem where the people who are developing AI for profit purposes are not internalizing the potential costs of AI. Now, the problem is not with the creative destruction aspect of AI. All good technologies have both destructive sides and creative sides, but the problem is how to make the creative side exceed the benefits exceed the costs of the disruptive side. And that was going to take government policy, funding, and leadership, as Professor Acemoglu says, but these are difficult to organize in a very highly polarized political environment. Now, my main question was about what about the global South? Who is the we? And Professor Acemoglu did address that in his oral presentation, that the global South is excluded from this vision. And in fact, a lot of concern seems to be people say, well, we're not going to be adopting these technologies in the global South very quickly, and therefore we may not experience those negative downsides. But I think the reality is that we will. And the indirect impacts of the technology, even if it's not adopted in the global south, the indirect impacts of automation and of displacement is going to happen. Here are a couple of examples. For example, we know that the previous wave of ICT technologies has allowed the shifting of productive activities to the periphery so that because it could be controlled and standards could be set, and these things could be exported back to the global north. Now, automation is going to really reverse that process by allowing things to be produced in the global north without the need for using the cheap labor of the global south because of the use of more capital-intensive automated technology. Now, and even the issue of trade and services was the new frontier that many countries were going to jump on the bandwagon of being able to trade services through ICT, the same way that India has done with business process outsourcing and other professional services that they were able to trade online. Now, in fact, these are the most likely types of activities that are going to be affected by AI and will be, if automated, will be done in the global north, and there'll be few opportunities that many countries were hoping were going to be the way that the increasingly educated labor forces were going to participate in that globalization. So, yeah. So I think that the consequences of who decides and who's going to regulate is really important, and I just doubt that our global institutional frameworks are ready for the kind of discussions that are necessary and the kind of regulation that is necessary to reorient AI in this human direction. And so whatever the Europeans decide are the rules, or the Americans decide are the rules, will be the ones we're going to be living with. The problem, though, is that because of the deficit in democratization in the global south, the negative roadblocks that Professor Acemoglu talked about, which is the control of information, the surveillance, the invasion of privacy, the manipulation and loss of information diversity, is going to be a tool in the non-democratic and repression of independent and autonomous voices in the South. So that even adds to the negative potential consequences. So we have, it's a tough road ahead for us in controlling this technology and limiting its negative aspects, but we will have to see how things proceed. Thank you.
Our second commentator is Dr. Najat El-Mekawi.
Thank you, Asena, and I would like also to take this opportunity to thank the organizer to give me this possibility to discuss Darren's paper. And Darren, thank you very much for sharing with us your ideas. So. Automation and Gen AI development and impact are not neutral for developed economy and also for developing country. So I have some slides, and I would like to present a few facts and highlight some possible consequences for the MENA region. So let me start with these two groups of figures. It's about demography. About the young dependency ratio and the old dependency ratio in different regions in the world. So very quickly what we can see is we have two groups. In the global context, we have two groups of countries that can be differentiated. One group where aging is very significant, and a country where people are aging very fast, and it's the case in Asian country, European country, North American country. And the second group is with the region where the majority of population is young, very young, and it's the case specifically in Sub-Saharan region and in Middle East and North African country. And so means that the spread of benefit of automation and Gen AI will vary greatly from region to region. And Darren, only let me provide one result of one of your previous paper, where you emphasized that demographic is one of the main determinants of automation, and it benefits mainly for aging country. So let's see what could happen in young country. So MENA region, as you know, has one of the youngest population in the world, and it's also, unfortunately, also a region that have also one of the highest educated unemployment rate for our young population. And we have also a very strong gaps, skill gaps. So high skill employment stand at 21% on average, while middle skilled roles account for 66% of formal sector job. And this is in the region, in the Middle East and North African country. So we have this very young population, and in the very near future, what we will observe is also population also will grow in the fastest rate, and it will be for the old people. So we will have in some countries also to deal with, in the first part, with this very young population, and in the same time with very old population. So what we will observe in some MENA region is a very great intergenerational differences in style of work and communication. And it's still what we have and what we observe in some developed countries. So in this context, so this will mean that we have to pay attention to employability skill, but also to intergenerational changes. So just to show you, because when we talk about developing countries, Middle East, and some African countries, is of course we have this. It's a great opportunity having a young population, and just only to give you some figures about the situation that also we will have in our region. So many countries in the region will cope with a fast rising aging population. So you have Lebanon, Algeria, Tunisia, so different country, and it's not in many years. So another factor that could also have a greater impact on the region is about the data. And this morning we had different colleagues also raising the same situation about data in the region. It's the data limitation. And the success of generative AI deeply rely on the quality and quantity of data it's trained on. And data in the region can be fragmented, incomplete, and leading to AI model to disseminate different biases and underform due to lack of comprehensive training data. So there are different possibilities, we hope, to fight this limitation. And it's to make data public, to share data, and to give the possibility to, of course, all the community, and not only academia, but all the community who would like to do research and to work on this limitation. So another fact that also we could highlight in the region is about the size of enterprise. In the region, micro and SMEs account for around 80% of all businesses, and this is what we observe in most countries. And the benefit of Gen AI are concentrated in the hand of the biggest company, of large company. So means that the benefits are not going to be equally distributed among countries. So I have many questions, but let's focus on this one, because it's questions that we could have for our region, but also for other developing countries. So our country in the region in a position to deal with experience, intergenerational differences, and avoid deepening the gap in the economy, means intra gap and also between their economies and those of developed countries. So we could see it, we could have this intra and inter impact. So as you mentioned, Darren, in your presentation, we could see the possibility to develop new norms and regulations. So do the norms have to be national or maybe international? And if we think about kind of norm that we have developed in the case of climate change, so it means that we need also to think about metrics, what kind of metrics we could develop. Thank you.
Our third commentator is Dr. Javad Salehi Isfahani.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to address this crowd and to discuss Professor Ajimoglu's work, although it's a very daunting task. When Dr. Ibrahim asked me to do this, first I thought, I don't know anything about AI. Well, what can I say? Then I read the book, Power and Progress, and I realized there was some stuff that interested me, and I work on the labor markets, employment. And then I also remembered that my graduate education that I had not quite followed was very helpful. I took a course in Marxian economics, where my teacher, Sam Bowles, used to say, when you buy a shirt, you get a shirt. When you buy labor, you get trouble. And this is very nicely displayed in this rent that is generated by the matching of workers and employers, and power at the national level and the factory level determines how this rent is shared, whether the workers get all of it, or as Marx predicted, he was very pessimistic, that capitalists will find many ways to get all the rent, which is to raise the rate of exploitation by extracting more effort from the workers. I also remembered that in Marx, in his critique of Jevons, I believe, he belittled the focus of neoclassicals on consumption as the purpose for life, and work as a necessary thing in order to be able to consume. And he talked about creativity, he talked about why people need work. And my own personal experience is that I don't work for consumption. If I don't work and I have my consumption, I'm very, very unhappy, which is why I'm still teaching and not in a rush to retire. In my first job, I had the pleasure of sitting in a talk by Vasily Leontiev. And he was talking about how machinery had made horses in his thick Russian accent, had become unnecessary and it had been put to pasture. And since you couldn't do the same thing about humans, this should be a big concern of economists. I looked around the room, there were not many of my learned colleagues who were alarmed by this. And I thought, well, maybe they take their solace from Solo's flexible technology, where capital labor ratios change to ensure full employment under all circumstances. I think the book demonstrates very nicely that that is not a very likely scenario, that if automation takes place on a steroids, which is my understanding of AI, that we may not be able to deal, or technology may not be flexible enough to deal with the necessary demand for labor. Since I don't know a whole lot about AI, let me talk about automation. I do know a little something about automation. In countries of the Middle East, especially the oil-rich countries that I look at, and especially Iran, where I come from, capital is cheap. For example, I visited a factory several times in my travels that makes cheese from milk. They had bought a second-hand factory from Denmark, lock, stock, and barrel, and it was very automated. Why? Because Danish labor is expensive. And they brought it to my hometown, where there's a lot of unemployment. And then, in the old days, when you entered the factory, there was somebody sitting there who'd put a plastic cover on your shoe so you wouldn't contaminate anything. You walked into the factory, you said hi, you know, it was kind of a greeting thing. And later years, that person had been replaced by a machine, where you put your foot inside the machine and it puts the shoe cover on your foot. And I wondered, why is this? Now I can't say hello to this machine. Something is lost, and what has been gained? The factory owner said, this is helping me a lot because I need to minimize the number of workers. And he explained that, this is in Iran, of course, a post-revolution country, it's very hard to work with workers. They have a lot of support inside the government, and the labor laws are very difficult. So it wasn't the cost of labor, it was the cost of managing labor, the sharing of the rent. Ironically, the sharing of the rent wasn't all in favor of the employers. So these are reasons why we have fairly high capital labor ratios and a lot of automation. Automation also appeals to people as something modern, something new. So when they see these shiny machines and they do the job of people, they think, well, it's better. You know, the factory owner, cheese factory owner kept saying, you know, none of these people can touch anything. You know, that's really great. They can't touch anything because they might pollute something, they might do something wrong. Now let me turn to another lesson from my observations in Middle Eastern education markets. Perhaps the biggest automation, the most consequential automation in the Middle East educational system has been multiple choice testing by computers. It replaced a relationship between a student and a faculty or a student and teacher, and has had consequences that we weren't aware of at the time. And this is an important lesson because when AI takes over and this thing goes on steroid, then these consequences, we can't even predict them. By the time you understand what has happened, maybe too late. Let me tell you the kind of things that happens when you automate grading. About 1 million plus students take these 2 4-hour exams, multiple choice tests in Iran. In most Middle Eastern countries, entrance into universities is dominated by this big test. And it makes a lot of sense. It's so much cheaper than hiring people to do things. And also, it appears to be much more objective and therefore reducing inequality. So we have adopted this technology worldwide, and the consequence that nobody predicted was that the set of skills that people invest in narrows and narrows. Writing goes, then history goes, and people do science and math with multiple choice. This is not a small matter, because when they graduate, they go to a world in which multiple choice plays no role. There's no employer who rewards people by how many bubble sheets you can fill. You have to perform, show up, be optimistic, work with others, lots of other characteristics that in a school that emphasize those things, including writing, you would learn. But if everybody's doing this overemphasis on multiple choice and training for it, lots of mock tests and so on, that is not a good preparation for work. One final point. So if we haven't done so well with automation in the human capital production in the region, what chance do we have if we jump into AI, let them replace professors? No, I'm not worried about my job, I'm retiring, but it is going to influence the one thing that still goes on in schools, which is you work with people in team and with a person who evaluates you. Evaluation is a very important part of the system. If you narrow all the skills to 1 or 2, you get into this normal distribution of the innate abilities, which then determines the Gini coefficient. Whereas if you had 100 skills from art, writing, singing, theater, math, science, you would get a lot of perhaps, hopefully, uncorrelated normal distributions that might result in a better income distribution. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
So thank you, professors, for your presentations, for your insightful comments. I think it's time to get some questions from the floor, from the audience.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to ask two quick questions. One of them is what implications the process of technology in terms of digitalization, automation, and AI is likely to have on the social contract, especially from the perspective of social protection. Do you anticipate that governments will be forced by the same kind of social mobilization that might change the course of or influence the change of technology, and AI might also kind of put pressure on the governments to adopt much more progressive social agenda. Finally, Anis or Yanis Varoufakis is talking about the end of capitalism and the beginning of digital feudalism. Is that something you think is relevant to this kind of discussion? Thank you.
Thank you very much for very great presentation, and also thank you our commentators for insightful comments. And I would like to follow up on Jawad's concern about learning and what's going to happen to plagiarism in this context, and what's going to happen to the nature of learning. Will it still be memorizing and learning the facts rather than interpreting and emphasizing changes, etc.? So that's my question on the nature of future learning process in our countries.
Thank you very much. I have two questions for Professor Acemoglu and the commentators as well. First, I was wondering, given the work that was done by Dr. Raghi also in different papers, to what extent all the vulnerable categories in the MENA region, whether they are informal workers, unskilled workers, or especially informal and irregular workers, they will be protected from all this in the sense that the AI is very less likely to be a substitute for their own skills. So in this case, does being vulnerable will be like, in this case, a source of resilience for those workers or not? That's on one hand. And I'm very happy that you raised the issue also of trade in services, because I was wondering to what extent, and perhaps Professor Acemoglu can respond to that, to what extent the institutional setup of trade agreements will have to be adapted in order to take this into account, in the sense that currently the service commitments are very limited in trade agreements, and it will be even more challenging after this when it comes to regulating trade and services through an AI lens. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this presentation. I think the propaganda for IIE is overrated and exaggerated. I don't think that human being will forget their presence, physical presence in this earth, because we feel that technology is substituting or crowding out our feeling, our presence in our existence. This is very important. I remember 5 years ago, I had to make a test English speaking. So I had the choice between robot or someone who is real life. So I have chosen I selected the second option. So I think this is a threat if we cannot manage it or control it because we are a human being, not machines. Thank you very much.
Should we ask if Professor Acemoglu or if any one of the commentators would like to respond to the questions?
Can I just ask one quick question? Sorry. So as an educator, I just wanted to say that I already see this idea of loss of human diversity when you see a bunch of student papers and assignments that are making the exact same mistake. The issue of plagiarism is a huge deal, and it raises the issue of the frontiers of knowledge. Are we going to, at some point, reach an end to new knowledge and new ideas? But then I think for our region, more importantly, the AR revolution is already here. What can we do to make our workers ready? What kind of skills, what kind of new education methods and tools are we going to need to introduce to ensure that they are ready since the revolution is already here? We can't really stop it, as you mentioned. We don't really have a seat at the table. We just have to deal with whatever is going to come. Thank you.
Yes, several crucial comments have been made, issues have been raised. Why don't we let Professor Acemoglu respond to these, and then we will proceed.
Thank you, Asena. It's so many fantastic comments and not enough time. Well, first of all, thank you for the three discussants for excellent and very insightful comments, and also thanks to the audience. You can hear me, right? Yeah. So I think the last comment actually answered some of the questions that were posed earlier on. I think we're already seeing the decline in human diversity and human exploration. It's not inevitable. Again, it's another area where choice is very important. There are ways in which we could use AI tools to further human creativity, but that's not the current way that it's being used in the education system in the United States, and I think it's not the way, it's not the likely way it will be used in the rest of the world either. So let me actually spend my remaining 2 minutes to say a few more things about the Global South, and I think all three discussants also made several important points. Like Javad said, my concern is very much that AI on its current path would be an inappropriate technology for the developing world, meaning just like the overly capital-intensive tools that were imported without sufficient thought about the institutional context, about the comparative advantage of the countries, and then didn't quite deliver. And that doesn't mean that we should just worry about the adoption of technology, like several people have said. It's going to change the global division of labor. So AI is something that the developing world will have to grapple with. So there are some obvious things, providing more education in schools that prepares youth to deal with a world in which AI is going to play a role. That's very straightforward. Najat absolutely is right in emphasizing how countries that are at different stages of the demographic transition may have different opportunities and different challenges. By the way, I think the previous evidence for example, from countries such as South Korea, Japan, and Germany, is that they've done well when they have used new technologies, not just to automate. They've done quite a bit of that with robotics, for example, but also for making their remaining workers more productive. So again, it comes back to this issue of how can we use technology in a human complementary way. But I want to leave you with the following thought based on my interactions with politicians, business leaders, and civil society organizations in Turkey and in Latin America. Unfortunately not. I haven't had the same interactions with people from the rest of the Middle East or the Africa region. But my sense is that businesses are waking up to the challenges and opportunities, especially those that are more outward facing. But I have not seen any politician who is really grappling. And I think, as several people in the room have also emphasized, it's very unlikely that something good will automatically come for the developing world unless the developing world has a voice about what type of technologies are developed, how they are marketed, how they are used in the global south. And the only way to do that is for the global south political leaders and civil society leaders to prioritize this and to form some sort of consortium. You know, if Egypt is worried about this by itself, it's not going to have an effect. If Turkey is worried about it by itself, it's not going to have an effect. If Mexico is worried, it's not going to have an effect. But if, you know, all of these countries come together and have a voice and try to influence the direction of AI and have a say about how AI is used and how it's imported into their countries, I think it will have a voice. And I think there are organizations, they're not perfect, but there are organizations such as the UN, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, ILO, that could play the role of a shell, but it has to come from political leaders and perhaps civil society leaders in the global south. So that's where I'll end my thoughts. And I think these kinds of discussions are useful precisely perhaps because they could be a trigger for that. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and listening to me.
Great to see you. We hope that
Wonderful rest of conference to all of you. Bye-bye.
we hope you can be with us in face-to-face next time.
Thank you. I hope so too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Daron had to leave early, but we still have half an hour till the end of the session if you're interested in more discussion.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the great discussion. It's very insightful and intriguing. All the thoughts from Dr. Acemoglu and the commentators, it's great. But I wanted to focus on the global south catching up with the digitization and AI. But before I start with that, there are two things. I think that you got me confused between AI and generative AI, because in my brain, these are two different things. AI is augmenting every single thing that we do. Generative AI is only augmenting a small part of activities that we do in our life, and it's very limited in its scope up till now. That doesn't negate the fact that it's going to explode in the future. However, AI might be making the life of many people easier, along with challenges that might pose on societies. The second point where I wanted to focus on the global south and between brackets on our region. Don't you think, and following the recent discussions of Professor Danny Roderick, on that developing countries have already failed to, or majority of developing countries, including the ones that we live in, has failed to catch up with the industrialization process. Industries has stagnated for a long period of time. There are vast evidence from Tunisia, Egypt, and other countries. While we got stuck now, we are facing the fourth industrial revolution, where is the flow of information is free. And at the same time, the digital wave could be transferred easily to the global south, including our countries. And at the same time, it would be our opportunity to catch up with the rest of the world, specifically since we passed through a de-development stage for a long period of time, and now it's the right timing to catch up with the new wave. Couple of issues that, and I wanted to provide a good example on this. We at ESQA, we built something called ESQA Skills Monitor. It's something similar of a forest where it looks at the skills and occupations of each country. We have 3 successful countries in the region that are diversified, and they're creating their own cluster that is very dense compared to the rest of the region. Jordan, I mean, at the beginning, Egypt, at the top of the list, Jordan and Lebanon. Regardless of all the mess that Lebanon is going through, but they have a vast demand of skills on the ICT sector and the digital economy sector. I think data-driven evidence shows that we have hope based on this revolution. We can skip the manufacturing phase that we missed, and we can catch up with the rest of the world, yet it has to be managed by policymakers in order to have a successful transition. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd also want to respond to some earlier comments that we...
Sure. Is your mic working? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a great deal of uncertainty about what the specific effects of generative AI versus AI, generally speaking. But what we're at the facing is basically a major technological revolution and transformation. And under every single one of the past technological revolutions and revolutions, we have had dramatic dislocation due to creative destructions. Now, in the past, it happened that the new tasks that were created as a result of these technological revolutions exceeded the destructive part of the resolution in terms of displacing jobs and automation, etc. But that is not guaranteed. It is something that was true in past revolutions, but not guaranteed. Now, even if the net new jobs created are sufficient, that doesn't mean that there are not major losers and winners. And we currently do not have the institutional frameworks that are able to compensate the losers from the gains of the winners. And so in this case, the winners are going to be large capitalist IT firms that are going to make a lot of money. And there has to be thinking about redistributive institutions to create the sort of programs that help communities and workers and firms that are losing out from this technological revolution. So I think this is broad in terms of just the nature of the magnitude of this technological revolution. Now, but there are specific issues that Daron brought up that have to do with specificities to the revolution, which is the loss of information, the breadth of information, the control over information, the loss of creativity that results from having everybody narrowing their ways of obtaining information. These are very specific to this particular technological revolution, and I think those kind of require specific interventions at the legal issue. I want to get back to the issue of social protection, because this is something that Ibrahim brought up and was brought up by Shahir to some extent. I mean, we know that it's very hard to provide social protection to irregular workers, informal workers, partly because a lot of our social protection systems are job-based. And this is going to become even harder as the gig economy becomes driven on steroids, and AI drives a lot of jobs being kind of just in time and the gig. So we have to absolutely move to social protection systems that are not job-based, but are citizenship-based. And that is a movement it's a political will question, whether, for instance, right now, Egypt is working on comprehensive health insurance. Does it make it a citizenship right or related to jobs? And I think that it's a design issue. So I think we absolutely have to move to a citizenship-based social protection system that is then financed by taxes on those huge rents that are being obtained by the companies that are introducing these new technologies. So I'll stop here.
Maybe you turn it off. Maybe I'll add one thing about the experience of Iran, on which I've done some research, which is cash transfers. You mentioned social protection, which is citizenship-based. At least the oil exporting countries that either have oil money from exports or they subsidize energy domestically, and if they don't, they will have cash that they can distribute to the public. They can deal with the social protection side of this, okay, but at the same time, they are also more open to this onslaught of technology and taking jobs away. The countries in the southern Persian Gulf use imported labor whenever they need something done. I think that is like kicking the can down the road. There's a lot of skills that are learned when you're dealing with labor shortage that you need to deal with as they come. If you keep importing labor every time the oil prices go up, on the downside, you may have a disaster on your hand because you have a population who's unwilling to do a lot of the work that the migrant workers did and may cut back on production, on supply of those services, rather than substitute their own labor for imported labor. So there is a, I think, distinction between the oil-rich countries and the rest in terms of dealing with this incoming technology. The oil-rich are in a better position to take care of those who lose their jobs, but at the same time, they are more in danger of having to lay off people because they can buy the shiny machines that replace labor.
Thank you very much. There's from Ismail Bushanan. My name is Ismail and I'm from Rwanda. My simple question would be, would you kindly explain to me how AI is going to create new jobs and tasks? What are those tasks? Are countries in Africa well prepared or well informed about these changes? How to deal with matter of public policy? And then a set of related questions from Ismail again, how these processes of changes in terms of implementation of AI digital technologies, are these countries away on how to deal with this matter of AI, especially in African continent? And then from Nader Habibi, how will AI expansion affect the attitudes of voters and policymakers towards the universal minimum income concept? If a large number of middle-class university graduates lose their jobs to AI, will they emerge as a political bloc to support redistribution and minimum basic income policies?
Away from labor, and how do you suggest as the AI enters into the production process, there is going to be an increase in capital, and capital is going to acquire all, according to the Marx, all of the share of the increasing income, and the labor is going to be the loser, and in the both the present knowledge workers and the manual workers who will lose their jobs to robots. And my question is, probably there is going to be some sort of taxation to redistribute income and lessen the inequality that may appear as a result of this process. But does our speakers have a suggestion on a system to reduce inequality and do the redistribution? How should it be done? That I would like to know. I'm really curious about.
So anyway, the issues of how to redistribute, clearly, if we accept the idea that there are winners and losers, and that in the past technological revolutions, there's always been people who were always emphasizing the losses and not anticipating the wins. I think in this revolution, the wins are going to be there, but who's going to get them is the question. And so redistribution is a very important question. Of course, that's why the idea of universal basic income has been brought up, and where from? Silicon Valley was the first place to say that AI is going to have so many displacements of jobs that we need universal basic income. I think that you know, the idea of compensating the losers based on citizenship, based on the right to be part of this, have a minimum standard of living is there, but I don't think universal basic income is the only way to do it, right? We have targeted transfers, for example, could play the same role if we're able to identify the losers fairly accurately. Then targeted transfers could probably be more efficient, especially in the context of poor taxing systems where you can't you know, observe, you can give income to everybody and then take it back from those who don't need it. So I think that we need to move towards systems that are able to compensate losers through redistribution. But the problem is that the rents that are going to be the winners are going to be global in nature and are going to be very difficult for individual national governments to capture, right? These are going to be very mobile and very global. So unless there is some kind of way to have a minimum corporate tax that cuts across all countries or something of the sort, it's going to be very hard to tax the winners and in order to do the compensations that are necessary.
I mean, by saying, you know, this is like an unknown threat. We know how to deal with known threats. For example, if automation was the problem, we would have a policy, we would have a discussion, and we would say, for example, if you automate, you leave workers, you have to pay a tax to prevent automation that takes people out of factories and puts them on the public dole. But what do you do when the threat is unknown? And that's the way I see AI. Maybe it's because of my ignorance. I can't predict what's coming next. I'm just imagining that it's going to be more automation, more replacement. The one thing I can point to is that a society that doesn't have an internal dialogue is ill-prepared to deal with this kind of threat. When it comes, it's very important for newspapers, for workers, unions, if there are such, to be able to look at the new situation. I don't know, is that something is ringing? Carry on? Okay, I'm not being warned about anything. All right. I think it's going to be difficult to make national decisions that deal with new situations if you have these authoritarian systems top-down where people on top know everything and people at the bottom don't know anything. Take one example. One solution to lower demand for labor is work sharing. It doesn't have to be that of the two people, one of them is redundant, she leaves the labor force and goes collects cash, and the other one does 10 hours of work per day. Maybe they can agree to do half and half. But under the market system, that will not happen because employers always have an incentive to have one person come for 8 to 10 hours rather than two people come because it's costly for them. There's a fixed cost with people coming and going. So you need a national dialogue if you want to do something like that. If you want to allow work sharing, who's going to share with whom. You know, in academia, we do have instances in which a couple who come to university, they need two jobs, there's only one, and they agree to take half and half. So they both become half-time assistant professors and carry on jobs. I say this because having a job is very different than having income. Income is very important, but jobs, and this is the problem we've had with looking at young people, because they work very hard to get at the door of the factory, and then they are told they're not needed. They need to go back to their parents' home and wait maybe a year, maybe 3 years, 5 years. That's devastating. I don't know how, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we were studying these things, we thought if this continues, something terrible will happen. Well, luckily, nothing terrible has happened, except there's a couple of wars. But that's right. So I think one of the things we need to do is to become more aware that authoritarian systems who work rather well with given threats and given situations may not do as well. Right now, there is an understanding in a lot of countries in the Middle East that authoritarian leaders are good because they reduce market chaos and they centralize decision-making. And I think that works well when the situation is static and what's coming is known and you prepare for it. But you enter a fluid world, AI for me is automation on a steroid. It's like an invasive species. When you're dealing with that, you need more sophistication, and it doesn't work to say the great leader knows everything.
Thank you, professors, for your presentations and comments. I'm Bahsin Rania, a third-year student majoring in applied economics, and I would like to ask a question, please. As AI and automation continue to advance, there are concerns about job displacements. So how can African economies strike a balance between embracing technological progress and ensuring job securities for workers? Thank you.
Very well, right? Protecting workers works a lot better than protecting jobs. And we need to have systems that, especially when you have such disruptive technological revolutions, you need to have systems that allow workers to flexibly move from one job to another to kind of capture where that growth is occurring and move from sectors that are declining and where the disruptions are occurring. So we don't want to protect jobs because it prevents that kind of adjustment from happening. So the way to approach this question is to protect workers as they make these transitions and they try to adapt to these dislocations. And that's where portable social protection that is not dependent on one job really plays a major role.
Could we get, okay, there are still more questions. One from there, one from here.
Okay. So There is a saying that it's not AI that is taking your job, it's the person who is using AI is taking your job. So it's not the AI that is taking the job. One additional point that I would like to add, and we'll ask decent professors, don't you think that we need to look about the problem first, why these people are getting left over and not kept in their jobs, before start thinking about giving up and start thinking about social protection programs that will cover these the people at large, where we go to Dr. Asfahani's point, this is the unknown. The known thing that we know is that the region that we're living in, majority of the people are mid-skilled employees that are prone to lose their jobs due to automation. This is something that we know. The other thing is that we know that our educational systems are not capable of delivering of what the market needs, are not not as fast as the market is requesting. Also, this is another known. Why don't we start from there, identifying the problem, and then trying to deliver policies, including global universal cash transfers and others, where we already failed in delivering any of these social protection plans previously. I don't see how we are going to deliver them in the future. But I think, and in line with the ILO's lifelong learning, and revolutionize the educational program in the region, would reduce the penalty that Dr. Raghi was talking about. And then we start thinking about social protection program. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please? Okay, throughout human history, we have always have disruptive technologies, and the humans have managed to deal with them. So what makes this AI disruptive technology special and I mean causing much more concerns than other technologies?
I would like to reflect on the point that Dr. Darlan raised before concluding his remarks. He emphasized on our focus should not only be on catching up, but also on coming together to influence the direction for our collective benefit. So one approach to consider as we look at the existing opportunities is the development of blockchain technology, where some countries are making significant progress in this area. For instance, our continent is still primarily engaged with mobile banking. So this actually highlights the importance of not just catching up, but actually shaping our technological future. So my simple question is, what concrete strategies should we implement to ensure the AI development is both equitable and beneficial for countries of the global south?
I may have one last question, maybe, if I may.
Well, the time is up, unfortunately. Maybe we should ask our commentators whether they have any final comments to make. A few words, maybe, and then we will close the session.
I think we've all said a lot and enough, and people are very tired. So, so I just want to respond to the question: why are people so concerned about this particular technology? What's so special about it? Well, it's the pace of change and the pace of progress in this technology has been much, much faster in the last few years. And the fact is that the predictions are that this technology will be very disruptive and will create a lot of change. And it's not just because people are guessing. It's people have done research about this and have actually seen that the potential of this technology to be as disruptive as the internet was 30 years ago. So I think that the doesn't mean that it's going to be all negative, but it's going to be disruptive, and it's going to have positives and negatives and losers and gainers, and we have to know how to deal with that. So I think this is kind of where I would stop here. I'm usually a technology optimist, but I do see that there are very strong dislocations that are going to happen as a result of this technology.
Great, great. So many, many thanks to all of you who contributed to this great session. It's a fascinating topic, and we have a lot to learn. There are many, many questions left to be answered still. Have a good evening and enjoy the rest of the conference.